You're sitting in a waiting room. Your phone is at 1%. There is nothing to look at except a clock that seems to be moving backward. Your skin starts to feel tight. Your leg starts to bounce. You would almost rather feel pain than feel this. That feeling has a name. You call it boredom. But the real answer is far stranger than a name. Boredom is not the absence of anything. It is not your brain doing nothing. It is one of the oldest alarm systems your body has, and it was never built to make you comfortable. It was built to make you move. Think about that for a second. Why would evolution waste energy building a system whose entire job is to make you feel awful? Pain keeps you away from fire. Fear keeps you away from cliffs. What is boredom protecting you from? The answer starts almost 2 million years ago, long before clocks, long before walls, long before anyone had the luxury of being bored on purpose. Your ancestors lived inside a world that punished stillness. A hunter-gatherer who sat in one place too long was not relaxing. He was running out of food, missing a herd migration, or sitting directly in the path of something with teeth. Stillness, for most of human history, was not peace. It was a warning sign. So your brain built a feeling whose only purpose was to make stillness unbearable. Not pain, not fear, something quieter. A restlessness that built slowly, like pressure behind a dam, until you had no choice but to do something about it. That feeling is boredom, and it worked exactly as designed for almost the entire span of human existence. Here is where it gets strange. Dr. John Eastwood, a psychologist at York University, defines boredom as the uncomfortable wanting of satisfying activity, paired with the inability to engage in one. Notice what that definition does not say. It does not say boredom is having nothing to do. It says boredom is wanting to do something and being unable to find it. That distinction matters more than it sounds like it should. A person alone in a cabin with no internet, no phone, no entertainment, can sit by a window for hours completely absorbed, completely content. Meanwhile, a person sitting in a meeting, surrounded by other people, surrounded by stimulation, can feel boredom so intense it borders on physical pain. So boredom is not about how much is happening around you. It is about whether your attention has anywhere to go. There is a second layer to this most people never think to ask about. Why would a feeling this unpleasant need to exist at all? Your body already has hunger to tell you when to eat. It already has fear to tell you when to run. Pain already tells you when something is wrong. What gap was left over that boredom needed to fill? The gap is attention itself. Hunger points you toward food. Fear points you away from danger. But neither of those systems tells you what to do with your mind during the long, uneventful stretches in between, the hours that make up most of a day, most of a life. Something had to fill that space, or your ancestors would have spent half their waking hours doing nothing useful at all. Boredom is the system that refused to let that happen. This is where the story takes its first real turn. In 2014, a team led by Dr. Timothy Wilson at the University of Virginia ran an experiment that became infamous almost overnight. Participants were placed alone in an empty room. No phone, no book, no window, just a chair and their own thoughts for 15 minutes. Before the experiment, most participants said they expected the experience to be mildly unpleasant, nothing more. They were wrong. A significant number of participants rated the experience as genuinely distressing. And then came the detail that made the study famous. The same participants were given the option to press a button that would deliver a mild electric shock to themselves. Many of them pressed it, voluntarily. Rather than sit alone with their own thoughts for a few more minutes, a portion of adults chose pain. Sit with that for a second. Not children. Not people with diagnosed conditions. Ordinary adults, alone with nothing but their own minds, chose a small jolt of physical pain over continued stillness. What does that tell you about what boredom actually is? It tells you boredom is not a mild inconvenience your brain made up to fill spare time. It is closer to a low-grade siren, and that siren can become loud enough that almost anything feels better than letting it keep ringing. Here's what makes this even stranger. The shock itself was not the point of the experiment. The researchers were not testing pain tolerance. They were testing what people would do to escape their own unoccupied mind. The shock was simply the only exit available. If the room had offered a window to stare out of, a single photograph to study, even a blank wall with a slightly interesting crack in the paint, the numbers might have looked completely different. It was not the absence of stimulation alone that broke people. It was the absence of anywhere for the search command to go. That detail will matter again later, because it is exactly what a smartphone solves in under a second, and exactly what your ancestors never had access to at all. Now connect that siren back to the world it was built for. For nearly all of human history, that siren had exactly one job: get you moving, get you looking, get you doing something useful before stillness becomes dangerous. A bored hunter-gatherer did not reach for a phone. He scanned the horizon. He checked the wind. He noticed the silence where birdsong should have been. Boredom pointed his attention outward, toward the one place where threats and opportunities actually lived. That outward pointing is the part of the system almost nobody talks about. Boredom was never just discomfort for its own sake. It was a search command. Go look. Go check. Go find the thing your environment is hiding from you. Here is the twist most people miss entirely. Your brain still runs that exact same search command today. The siren has not changed in 2 million years. What has changed is everything around it. Dr. Eastwood's research describes modern life as an environment engineered to interrupt that search before it even finishes. The moment the restlessness builds, you reach for a phone. The siren shuts off in under a second. Your ancestors' search command, the one built to scan a hillside for 30 tense seconds, now gets answered by a notification before the feeling has time to do its job. This is not a small mismatch. This is the entire problem hiding in plain sight. Your ancestors' boredom had nowhere fast to go, so it forced sustained attention. It built patience by necessity. Modern boredom gets answered instantly, so the search command never has to finish a single cycle. The alarm rings, you silence it, and the underlying restlessness never gets resolved. It just gets paused, over and over, thousands of times a day. Dr. Sandy Mann, a psychologist who has spent years studying boredom at the University of Central Lancashire, found something that should sound impossible if boredom is purely negative. In her research, people who were deliberately bored before a creative task performed better afterward than people who went straight into the task without any boring interval first. Why would an unpleasant feeling improve performance afterward? Because the search command does not switch off just because you stopped scanning the horizon. When there is no external thing left to search for, your brain turns the same machinery inward. It starts searching your own memories, your own associations, your own unfinished ideas. Mann's participants, given nothing to do but feel bored, came out the other side with more original ideas than participants who never had to sit with the feeling at all. That is the part of boredom that almost never survives the trip into modern life. The search has to actually run. It has to scan something, anything, for long enough to find what it is looking for. Interrupted every 6 seconds with a notification, and it never gets the chance to turn inward and search you instead. Think about how often that interruption happens in a single day. A 2021 analysis from researchers studying smartphone behavior found that the average person checks their phone dozens of times daily, often with gaps of only a few minutes between checks. Each one of those checks lands at almost exactly the moment the old alarm would have started building. The siren rings. You silence it instantly. It never gets loud enough to point anywhere except back at the phone in your hand. Compare that to a single afternoon in the life of someone 400 generations ago. No interruption was available, even if they wanted one. The boredom of walking the same stretch of grassland for the 100th time had nowhere to go except outward, into the texture of the wind, the pattern of birds overhead, the faint signs of something that had passed through recently. Or inward, into memory, into half-formed plans, into the kind of unstructured thinking that occasionally produces a genuinely new idea. There was no third option. The feeling had to be answered by the mind itself. That is the option modern life quietly removed. Not the feeling of boredom, the requirement that you sit with it long enough for it to actually do something. So here is the uncomfortable possibility hiding underneath all of this. The danger was never the feeling of boredom itself. The danger is what happens when an ancient alarm system gets answered instantly, forever, before it can finish doing its job. An animal that silences every alarm before checking what triggered it does not become safer. It becomes less aware, less alert to what its own mind is trying to tell it, less able to sit with restlessness long enough to discover what is actually causing it. That is what a phone at 1% battery in a waiting room with nothing else to look at is quietly forcing you to confront. Not nothing, not emptiness. The oldest search command your species ever built, finally given enough silence to finish running. Tonight, the next time that tightness creeps into your skin and your leg starts to bounce, you might reach for your phone in less than a second, the way you always do. But for just a moment before you do, ask yourself what your ancestor would have done standing on that same hillside in that same silence, with that same restlessness building. He would not have made it stop. He would have followed it outward, into the one place where the answer was actually waiting. Maybe the real question was never why boredom feels so unbearable. Maybe it's what you've stopped letting it find.